Your fate is set and you cannot escape it.
Fjolnir! I will avenge you, father! I will save you, mother! I will kill you, Fjolnir!
I will avenge you, father.
I will avenge you, father.
I will save you, mother.
I will save you, mother.
I will kill you, Fjolnir.
So I'm here today with Joselito, and we're here to talk about the movie The Northman. It's a new Robert Eggers movie, and it's starring Alexander Skarsgård and Nicole Kidman. It's an interesting movie, very slick advertising, where it kind of seemed like it was going to be one type of movie, but it turned out to be another type of movie, which is very interesting. We saw it, and then we wanted to discuss it, so this is our discussion on it. How you doing today, Joselito?
I'm fine. I'm good. Thank you for inviting me. I definitely looking forward to this.
No problem at all, man. I love your insight. And this is one of those kind of movies that it's not surface deep, you know, it's really have levels to it. It's kind of hard to do that nowadays, where you have a movie that's saying something that's also entertaining and that you could kind of chew on, because a lot of stuff that comes out is just so disposable and just surface level, almost to the point where you don't even revisit movies anymore. It's kind of like, I seen it, I got it, and I'm good. Versus like an actual discussion that could happen off the movie because of what it could potentially mean or what it's actually saying and things to consider. And the sad part is sometimes movies like this are hard to get an audience sometimes. And like we were saying before when we're talking about how they may not do so good in the theaters, but when they get on streaming and things like that, or you can buy them and watch them, how they could possibly get a new life where they're really appreciated. In those situations, they become cult classics. And so I think this movie is probably potentially kind of have the same kind of situation going on. So with the little synopsis that they have for it, it says The Northman is an action-filled epic that follows a young Viking prince on his quest to avenge his father's murder. And that's a good breakdown of the movie. It's interesting because the movie is as simple as that, but then there's layers to it. So I got to give the credit to the writer and director, Robert Eggers. And I think it's always interesting when sometimes you see that they're just overly complicated. And then when people watch them, it's just hard to process. So I always kind of love stories that are, say, maybe something basic, but it's seasoned so well that it just makes it a full meal when it just would have been a snack in other people's hands, you know?
Yeah. The thing about this, and when you read the synopsis and when you see the trailer, clearly, in my opinion, I think the trailer is a little bit deceptive, not in a bad way, but I think that if they did the trailer closer to reflect what the movie was about or how the movie was structured, it wouldn't have gotten like the mass interest, because like you had just mentioned that these type of movies wouldn't necessarily get a lot of audiences in the theaters, but the trailer made it such a way that people were expecting this movie to be just like nonstop bloodbath, like revenge tale, where he's just like, you know, kind of like a Die Hard type movie where it's just one man against the entire kingdom type of thing. But Eggers did the Witch, right? Did Eggers do the Witch?
Yeah, and then also the Lighthouse.
Okay, I didn't watch The Lighthouse, but I did see The Witch, and I saw that, okay, and The Witch is a totally different, like, it's more of a horror type thing, but even with The Witch, it was, when it first came out, it was kind of deceptive. The trailer was deceptive because if you've seen The Witch, it's similar to The Northman in that it's, both of them are kind of there's action in The Northman, but it's more of a slow burn. And it's like there's a point where, are we doing spoilers or no?
Yeah, this is just an open discussion. So
okay. Okay, so one of the things, one of the spoilers is that I thought it was kind of anticlimactic is when he finally has the chance as an adult to get his revenge on his uncle. The uncle isn't even a king anymore. So the uncle actually has kind of fall, not on hard times, but he's like kind of taken down a notch or two. And so it's a weird thing. Like when I saw that, I was having these conflicting feelings, but because it's easier to be angry, to be on his side as the Northman and get revenge on the uncle, because the uncle is like at the top of the throne. And so it's like against the stereotypical power system, you know, you're fighting the system. So it's easier to root for the Northman in that case, but it is a little bit more complicated because the uncle wasn't the top anymore and he was kind of living a more humbled life. So it was a weird, like, it felt like it was, yes, I was still rooting for him to get back at the uncle. Yeah. But I started, like, there were like chinks in my armor in terms of, I was starting to like view the uncle in a different light when I saw he's kind of been taken down a notch or two. So life has kind of dealt him a few blows here and there. So he's not as powerful as he used to be.
You know what? That's very interesting that you said that. I didn't think of it that way. The only reason I didn't trip off that part is just because, to me, if he was fighting like the system, since this is kind of like more grounded, the army and stuff that he would have to go against he wouldn't be able to win. You know, if this is more like a Conan or something like that, where, you know, the one man takes on the herd of the army and, like, you know, the king from the back is like, get him, and you see these thousands of troops, like, you know, coming after him or something like that, he'd be in trouble. And this is more grounded. He wasn't really had an issue with the kingdom. He had an issue with his uncle and what he did. So
yeah, the trailer seemed to make it seem like it would be like going against like all these obstacles and all these guys in a video game where you get to the final boss, you know, which is the uncle guy. The trailer was kind of implying that was the way the movie was going to be.
And that's normally how the movie goes too. I'm kind of curious if they kind of did it this way, you know, maybe due to budgeting and stuff like that too. You know, because this was kind of shown as an epic. But with watching it, even though it has some like notations of an epic, it really wasn't. To me, it didn't feel like that. To me, as simple as Conan was, that almost felt more epic. Or the Chronicles of Riddick almost seemed more epic than this. Even though this is positioned to seem like it, you know? Yeah. It wasn't like he was just fall into power. You know, he's about revenge, but he falls into power. It wasn't that kind of a thing. It was kind of like the other story that would probably be more on point of what would happen. And then the movies that we see that are so fanciful are kind of like the exaggeration of the stories. Like they told the tale of it, it would sound more like Conan, even though it's really like the Norseman actually was.
Yes.
So I thought it was kind of interesting. But like I said, it could have been due to the writing style of the director and the way he directs and what he finds important or the nuances he finds important. And then also it could be due to budget. Because I just knew this was going to be like a Conan meets 300 in a way.
Well, he was also, if you think about The Witch, he was also the Northman trying to, because remember in this movie, there's also the mixture of like mysticism and like whatever the religion is with like Odin versus like what they thought was like some, you know, I think Christianity was seen as the enemy, evil, almost like witchcraft type of religion to them. Mm-hmm. But like The Witch, where there's like slow, like burn type of psychological, you know, games, the Northman basically does that, where remember when he does the killings of to try to like mess with their heads, like what's going on, like who's doing this, like turning it to kind of like this murder mystery, but mixed in with like some kind of a haunting, you know, like some evil spirit thing, which is like kind of alluded to in the same thing as the way The Witch is, like the same thing, like what's going on, you don't know what evil force outside of our control is like doing this thing. In the Conan movies, it's like Conan doesn't like, I'm just gonna go and kill, you know, I'm just gonna scale the wall and just kill whoever's like in my way. But in the Northman, and you could say that's more realistic, because in his situation, he would have been killed if he even tried to just go straight up. He would have been killed right away. But in his situation, he did it the right way to do it, in order to ensure that he survived and to be able to finish his task at the end.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. This is more like the real story versus the epic story that they tell and sing about or whatnot or write about. And like I said, and also probably due to budget and stuff. But it wasn't that kind of a movie. It was more nuanced and things like that. a thing that really came up to me with this was like, perspective and how that's important and how that could just flip the whole movie. So to me, this is definitely a more cerebral kind of movie, because like from the beginning, you see like a child that's happy that his father's coming back, from battle or something, and he comes back and he comes home and everybody's glad to see him, and he sees his wife and they have this thing between them. You're not for sure what. He seems kind of cold to her, and it's almost kind of like she's being frivolous and he's really trying to handle business. Like a guy came home from work, a long day of work, and the woman's want to hang out and be all touchy-feely. He just be like, I'm just trying to unwind. I've been in the trenches all day. I've been dealing with all this kind of stuff. I just need to have my space, And so some people might have took it as like, oh, he's cold to her. But others might be like, yeah, when you come home from dealing with a whole bunch of stuff, the first thing you do is not necessarily want to, run up and be in somebody else's space. You kind of want your own.
Yeah, that's true. And I would have loved to be able to, like, if I could, like, had the ability to read people's minds, or even like where people could like actually like have like a poll as they're watching the movie to say what their feelings, because that's a good points that you make, where the two perspectives, like, like there is the perspective like, yeah, he just got home from all this war or whatever he was doing, so he wants to just chill and do his own thing and be by himself and not be bothered. But then on the other side, like, hey, I haven't seen you, I'm your loving, or supposedly your loving wife, so I'm trying to like express my feelings of missing you, and this is the way I express it, by wanting to be affectionate towards you and maybe even be intimate, but you're spurning me, so there's the two perspectives in that. Mm-hmm. So,
and then they have the celebration. They trying to do a thing for him, celebrating the victory and stuff. And so I thought it was very interesting how, on hindsight, and because of our change of perspective, because something that happens later on, the jester, or the shaman or whatever, he tells the truth of the whole thing. And because we don't have any insight, or we don't have the perspective, put like this, we felt the fact that what the jester said wasn't an issue, mainly because the way the king reacted to it. So it's almost like if it's not a concern for the king, then it must not be nothing. It must be a joke, you know? And so, like I said, that's another thing, that it was like the perspective was in such a way where they could tell you something that's pertinent information, but you don't take it as, that's almost kind of like a situation where like a room is on fire or something. But even though seeing the fire is a problem you should run, we more look out for the reaction of the people in the room. So if the people sitting in the room when there's a fire, we'll think, well, maybe it's not that bad because they're not running. We pay more attention to their reaction. So if they're running out there, then even if it's a little fire, we'll take it as a big fire because their reaction made them run. And so they did that to us too with that part. Because when I saw it and it got to the end, I'm like, he told us that. He told us exactly what the situation was, and we ignored it because we had a perspective of the person who thought it was no big deal. And so if it's no big deal, then it's not a big deal.
Yeah, but the thing is it's not like the movie was hiding the important gesture, because there is the scene when the father takes his son to the jester, and it's like a sacred, where they're like embodying like a wolf, and then they go into this, I don't know if they, whatever they drank, they went into a state of like, where they seemed like they went out of their body experience type of thing. But that was supposed to be like a sacred thing between a father and son, a bonding thing, and also I guess the son becoming a man, the symbolic thing. But the jester was in there. He was like moderating it. So that means that the jester was very, very important for the king. The fact that he's at that level where the king uses him for those type of situations where, you're going to help my son reach another level and also become like transcend from a man to a wolf and back again.
Right.
That means it, and that you're right, because we're seeing it from the perspective of the Northman. The jester told us all along. I'll add this too. And I wanted to bring this up about his perspective, because the scene with his mother, the where I wanted to watch the movie again, because was she laughing or was she crying and all upset? And what it like, It was interesting. Like, it's, the perspective.
Okay, so we'll go to the part where, like you said, they had a ceremony with his son. Not too long after that, the king is ambushed, and he's coming back with his son from the ritual, and the king is killed. The son is perceived to be killed, and we find out that they are killed by his brother. It's a hostile takeover. The brother's taking over the kingdom, and people seem to be cheering and stuff. But, the folks who's running with the person who's trying to take over, of course they will. So we don't know the perspective of the kingdom. We just know the few that we're seeing. And so we're just, we don't know if it's everybody that feels that way or if it's just the ones that are there with him or whatnot. And so, the son is hiding because, they're trying to find him and they can't find him. One of the guys are sent to kill him. And he says that he killed him, but he really didn't. But he does see his mom thrown over, his uncle's shoulder, and you can't see her face because she have, long blonde hair, and you see her just kicking and stuff. So, as a child, because we're seeing it through his eyes, his mom is getting, something bad could possibly happen to her. Like, she's the spoils of victory, and he can't do anything to save her. Seeing that for him, one, made him feel a certain kind of way because he couldn't do anything about it to protect his mother. Two, it gave him that energy to try to survive so he could get his revenge. And even his stroke in the boat leaving so he could one day find his revenge, he has this mantra, talking about, I'll revenge you, father, I'll revenge you, mother, and I'll kill you. I can't think of his uncle's name, but I'll kill you, Uncle Vilmer. Yeah. And that was powerful. Like, that gave him his mantra for his life, or his life to be. No frills, just simple, So regardless of what's going on, he needed to be that person to fulfill those things. And so when you see him, years later, and he's basically, they call them berserkers, but it's almost like this man animal or man beast thing. It's kind of like nothing else exists but for me to have my opportunity to be the tool I need to complete my mission, like, or this is only a jackhammer. Okay, I'm gonna be a jackhammer, so when I go to that wall again, I'll be able to do what I need to do. When we find him, just kind of like raiding a town, and we kind of know why and what's going on, but we know he is a tool, right? That's being used in a certain kind of way. Not his own purpose yet, but he's a tool, a sharpened tool. And so we catch him like that, and it's just like, okay, he's grown now, and he's tearing stuff up. And you just see, like, he's running with these folks, and we don't know how he met them or his place in it and all this kind of stuff. We just see that they are people who are pillaging and raiding camps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So something that kind of comes up for me, I was just considering, the time that was going on, but we see a scene where they're kind of gathering people up, right? And so you don't know if they're going to do a head count, or, they're going to, make these over here slaves, or these over here, they're going to be this and this and that. And they're kind of like loading people up. And you see in like the warriors, they just slaying right there. They just taking them out. Like, okay, you're going to be a problem. You're dead and out of the way. So and they're sparing certain ones, and they put the women and children in certain structures and killing some of them, and put some over here and over there. And when you're seeing that, you're kind of like, okay, so what's next for that? And then you see that the structure is being lit on fire, right? With the women and children.
Wasn't it just the children though? They showed some of the women in chains, which I assumed, okay, those are the ones that are going to be the slaves, or like the women that are going to be raped or whatever,
right?
Or paired off with whoever wanted to have them as like mates or whatever.
Yeah.
I thought it was mostly the children they were going to kill, and then the women. She was one of the only few women that I noticed that they seemed like they were intent on killing her. Maybe because wasn't she like a priestess or something, or she was some kind of a mystical type.
You talking about Olga, and she was like played by Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah, and
her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was like a mystic. So yeah, they kind of spared her because she had like a fight to her. And like I said, it could have just been kids in there. I couldn't tell, but I could tell that, like I said, they were just separating everybody out. And so, like I said, I don't know if it was just women in there that they wasn't planning on using, and just the kids or whatever. But I know they were separating out. Like I said, you had some that was in chains. Some of the men, they were just slaying right there. But then we also saw that they didn't kill all the men, because some of the men end up coming up later as, slaves and
yeah. See, because I thought, because in that time period, I would have understood that the women would have been spared because, they would have just been basically used, the ones that they want to kill are the ones that are going to be a danger to them in the future. And women are not, and that wouldn't have been viewed as, they're not going to be able to like do anything. It's a woman. But with Anya, I thought the reason why they wanted to kill her was because she was like some kind of a mystical, like she could be a danger to them, because if she's a witch, she can do something, curse them or bring blight or whatever, which is why I thought that was why they were going to kill her versus the other women, which they would have just obviously didn't want to kill the women. They just want, that's more like women they could have for themselves or use as slaves for their purposes.
Yeah, I wasn't for sure how they went about vetting people, because it seemed like it was so chaotic that I don't know if they would know who did what necessarily. It just seemed like it was so chaos. It wasn't really organized to me. That's why I thought they would just like quickly just kind of like, they knew that if they had to hit and move fast, because if anybody really had time to think about it, they'll be able to fight back. They'll be able to retaliate. They'll be able to try to run and get away. So I just took it as they just kind of hit them hard and they just did some quick shuffling of situations. But I did feel a ways when they lit that structure on fire with those, children for sure, but maybe children and women. But when they lit it, it was an interesting feeling to see that happen. And even as messed up as it was, in my head, considering the situation and seeing what happened to the Northman when he was a kid, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. You would have to do that.
It was that thought crept into my head too. And I felt, there's a part of me that's like, man, I'm a bad person. Right. But I thought I would do that too. Yeah. In that time period, that's the most logical thing to do, like without any sentiment and without any, and it's not even if you want to like try to measure it against morality, actually, you can't really apply morality to it, because in the sense of practicality, it's the most practical thing to do, because if you're trying to, whichever side of the tribe you're on, if you want to preserve your tribe in future generations, you have to do that, because you can't have any possibility of the children coming back to mess up your tribe in the future, or try to kill everybody in your tribe or rise up.
Yes, and then a clear example of that is our protagonist. So we know his mission, and we knew what happened to him. In his situation. In his situation, he got kind of raided, and as far as in his eyes of what the tragedy that happened, because we don't know what the brother took out some of the people in the town or whatever who was still for the original king. We don't know. But, so we've seen that what a potential young child can turn into. We're looking at him. Yeah. So we know the justification, because we're looking at trouble in the making for his uncle, just currently following him along. So it's almost kind of like, okay, so when you don't do that, we get him, and we know what he's about to do, or we know his mission.
Yeah, and it's also too the fact that during that time, the invaders, they know in their heads that, okay, we, are doing this, and so, it's totally justifiable. Like, if the losers of this, if the children, the boys growing up into men, it totally would be justifiable for them to want to get back at us, because we literally did this to them. It would be totally justifiable for them to do that to us when they grow up. So we have to kill them.
Yeah. Everything's hostile takeover. There's no negotiations and stuff. It's kind of like you hit them hard, hit them fast. And you just, live on top of the bones of the loser. Yeah. So that was an interesting scene. And then from there, I guess we find out they were kind of finding workers and people and stuff to be sold off to, other kingdoms and things like that. He found out that, a familiar kingdom to him, they were going to send potential slaves over to them. And he decided to, quote unquote, I guess, turn himself into a slave. And he hopped aboard a ship that was going towards old and familiar stomping grounds for him. But then we also hear a little information as far as his uncle that was king was no longer king. They kind of said it as jokingly, saying like he's pretty much like, he killed his brother for nothing, because he pretty much got taken over anyway. And he's pretty much a glorified shepherd, basically. Yeah. And our lead, Amleth, he didn't really blink about it. He knew he needed to get there to fulfill his revenge. So when he goes back, how'd you feel when you saw that he has this plot and everything, and he goes back and he happens to see his mother alive, happy, with children as well. Yeah.
Yeah. That threw a wrench in my thinking about, like, that was the first seeds of doubt I had in my head, where it was, before that it was all clear cut. I need to side with the Northman because everything that happened to him was like, it's justified for him to do what he's gonna do. But as soon as he saw his mother and she was wasn't she grooming or combing the hair of the uncle, and they seemed like, it was like a very tender moment. Like, if you never knew about the history of the two of them, right, you would have just thought that it's just like a loving couple, right? You know, and it's like, it was sweet actually. But it's obviously, it's through the eyes of the Northman, but we're seeing it too. So it's like, obviously for him, thinking in a different way because he's like intent on what he's doing. But for me, as soon as I saw it, I said, there's more to this than like meets the eye, because it's like, either she was broken down already and she just kind of accepted
Stockholm syndrome.
And like in a lot of situations where it's not that she necessarily loves the uncle, but because she has a kid, she's more focused on making sure that the kid survives. So in order to do that, she'll compromise her feelings about the uncle, assuming that she didn't love the uncle. Let's assume that, if that's from that perspective, she just wants to protect her kid. So she's, in this marriage, and for the sake of her kid, she's going to play the loving wife.
Yeah,
that's an argument. That's a perspective as well.
Yeah.
But we just took it on face value. It looked like she was genuinely happy. So it throw like a wrench into my thinking about the Northman's perspective.
Yeah, because like I said, she could have Stockholm syndrome or anything. We just didn't really know. But it was weird to see, one, that she was alive, and like I said, two, she was happy. And so he works his way into, I guess, the kingdom in a way, because really seeing him, I think their first thought was just like, get rid of him or kill him because he's too strong. He definitely looks like a warrior. But I thought it was pretty cool how he kind of changed his posture and didn't really look people in the eyes. He didn't speak much, so they thought he was, thought he was stupid because he wouldn't talk or anything. So he just knew to kind of play the role, but to show his strength where they would see it as being of service to them. And so therefore perceived him to be not smart. And then the fact that they saw his strength, it's almost like a animal, a mule or anything else.
Yeah.
So they they should have been afraid of him. But if they saw that he was smarter or felt that he was smarter, they would have just got rid of him.
Killed him. Yeah. Because he played the part of a dumb and brute. Yes. Then like, okay, well, he's not dangerous. We can use him to our ends.
Right.
And that's another interesting aspect, because he clearly could have he's like the strongest, and that even showed that was also part of it for me, where I thought that I was starting to have a little bit more empathy towards the uncle, because he not only is not the king anymore, he's kind of left with, he has like servants and like those other guards, but the guards look like they were just kind of like rent-a-cop type. Like they were just like they weren't the best warriors. They're just kind of like, they just had the advantage because they're just surrounded by slaves who are not going to do anything. But against like real warriors, those guards
they're like, they were very cold. They were kind of bullying kind of like the folks that were there. They're
only bullying them because they can get away with it. And the slaves are not going to, it's at a time where you just accepted your station in life, and there was no like thinking that you can because if you look at the slaves, some of those slaves, like they look like if they fought, they could have had a shot, because those guards were not like the greatest of they're kind of like the leftover guys that they wouldn't make the main army basically.
But I think that's why when they saw him, they were intimidated and wanted to get rid of him. But the uncle saw potential and thought, hey, we probably should keep him. Just like he wanted to keep Olga for other reasons, but he wanted to keep her around as well. And so I thought it was kind of interesting too. I started thinking something was kind of up when the uncle was talking to his son and was telling him telling his son to work hard and to do it in front of everybody. He's like, why are we doing this? And he said, because we want our people to know that we work just as hard as everybody else. He thought to say that. Don't just look like you're just ruling over people.
Well, yeah. Also, I think too, part of it too was because the uncle was making sure that, because like I said, those slaves kind of outnumber them.
Yeah.
And his security contingent, like if the slaves really wanted to fight back, they would have easily like overtaken and I think that was part of it too, where the uncle didn't want the slaves to really have a resentment. Like, they're not doing, this son is like a useless guy. Why are we working? Why are we slaves to this? So I think part of it was that, like, he didn't want to cause like a rebellion amongst his slaves.
The way the uncle said it to me, it was almost kind of like he didn't want to be perceived a certain kind of way, but I didn't take it as him being fearful. Like,
I didn't view it as like him being fearful. I just thought it was him being pragmatic.
Okay.
Like I said, going back to what I was saying about where they killed all the children, the boys, that's done out of pragmatism, not because you're like so fearful, but you're just thinking it's within their right to get revenge. And for the uncle, I think it's more of a pragmatic thing where it's like, it's within this, I mean, I don't know in terms of the structure where slaves can do that, but beyond whatever your station in life, it's within your right to like fight back if you feel like you have to fight back, which is, I think, what the uncle was trying to prevent, not for any fear or any he's lesser of a man, but I think it was just the uncle seemed like he was very pragmatic, very like trying to make sure that to protect his family in the most pragmatic way.
Okay. So Amleth works his way into, like I said, into the hierarchy in a way by, playing in their sports games and protecting the son, the prince, and things like that. And so he's playing with people's superstitions in a way, as far as like, taking out guards and stringing them up certain kind of ways. And so all these things are happening and they can't tell where it's coming from and they don't know who to blame. And so you could tell that he's just kind of setting up his plan. He's one person against an army. So he got to, work smart, not harder. And so he's just building up the fear and the questioning everything. And therefore, if they're off kilter, they're easier to knock over, basically. And so while he's working his way and doing that, and he knows that his mom is in there and he want to make sure she's protected. So he needs to, let her know what's going on. Because why wouldn't she be happy to find out that her firstborn is all right and safe? And then also he needs to let her know to hide, because when I start taking care of business, I don't want you hurt. I'm going to save you. Because first he's going to revenge mom and for his dad. But since he thought both of them were dead, it's going to be revenged. But since his, dad is, gone, he's going to revenge his father. He's going to save his mother. And then he's going to kill his uncle. And so he's going there to let her know, like, hey, I'm getting you out of here. I'm your son. Aren't you happy to see me? Then we get a whole perspective shift, right?
Which helped to reinforce the first stirrings of doubt I had when the scene when the mother was being, kind and affectionate towards the uncle and combing his hair. Right. So that like helped to kind of solidify. I was teetering kind of like where now, which side? I mean, I was still on the Northman side, but I was starting to have doubt. But as soon as the mother's reaction, like, okay, now it's a different ballgame now. It's not. And the interesting thing about it is everything leading up to that point, even like the whole thing with where Björk, where he had the vision with Björk, made it seem like the prophecies and like he was destined to get revenge against his uncle. Like right. He was in the right, like everything and all the fates and all the gods were on his side. But as soon as the mother had her reaction, it's like, were those like prophecies and things that was it all in his head, or is he still destined to do what he was supposed to do? But then now he's not necessarily it's not 100% like he's in the right. Like it's complicated now all of a sudden.
It is. And her reaction basically was almost kind of, wasn't excitement. It was almost disgust in a way. And she almost kind of, taunted him saying, so what, you kill my children, you kill my king, and what, I become your queen? like I said, I took it as, her kind of taunting him.
Yeah, but also in that scene, then we get the first information about his dad, right? Yeah. Where all of a sudden, it's not like all of what he believed to be his dad as a kid, and he adored him, and he's like the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And maybe he wasn't such a great guy after all.
Yeah, because she was saying to him, like, so you love me. So after she made the comment about, what, you're gonna be my king kind of thing, she threw out the fact that she was enslaved, and basically said, the way she said it, it was almost kind of like he put you on me, basically, like as if he was a child due to rape. With her not liking the situation and the way that kind of came about, it's almost kind of like she was glad that she was gone, and almost kind of insinuated that was her idea, like, I'm glad that he was gone. I didn't want him. I didn't want you or anything associated with that. He took me, he made me this kind of thing. So even though it's a prominent position, it doesn't matter if you still are under duress, if you still don't have no real power. It doesn't make it okay that somebody kidnapped you and gave you a better life. You still were stolen. You know what I mean? So sometimes the amenities that you get with something doesn't mean the fact that you're there is a good thing.
Yeah, and it was interesting because it wasn't only, she like kind of laid out more things about the father, also implying that he wasn't a great, because remember in that, the way the movie makes that culture where the greatest thing you could be as a ruler is that, or like as a warrior, is you die in battle, like a glorious death, right? That's always like they reference that movie, and then Ethan Hawke's character as the king kept saying that, right? Like that's what he wants. And if you remember, the mother, when she starts talking, taunts the son and talks about the father in a derisive way, she also implies that he's not like as great of a warrior king as you thought he was. Like, he's a pretender. She was implying that he's a pretender, and she was almost saying that the uncle was the real like warrior man that I should have been with. They do a great job when she talked about like how she was basically enslaved and the son was forced on him by the father. They juxtapose that because previous to that scene where the uncle is trying to basically rape Anya, that's the mirroring. That's exactly, they did that so that later when the mother, so you could say, oh, it's the same situation as what could have happened to Anya. Like, she was a slave and she would have been like raped, and she probably would have had a kid from, so it was a well done thing. They did that, they showed that, and then like when the mother reveals it, then you can understand, okay, so yeah.
In today's time, it'd be like the equivalent to all he cares about is work and power and money, but nothing else, and that's all he does. So it was almost kind of like she was implying like he didn't have a good work to life balance ratio, and like I said, she just didn't want anything to do with him. So that was a shock to see. And then also it made me think of earlier in the film when you see like the son, his dad is coming back, and he runs into the mother's room and she is upset. And I was surprised. I'm like, you would think that she'd have been excited that her husband was coming back and everything. It wouldn't trip about the kid, because the kid's kind of wherever you are, like she nursed him at one time. So it wouldn't be this thing where she would be like, oh, how are you? How dare you come in here and stuff like that. So the fact that she was so kind of cold on that, I was kind of confused. Like, why would she react like that to a kid running into the house or into the bedroom saying, hey, mom, dad's home? Even her reaction to that threw me off.
Yeah, you would think that, why would she? You just got this great news, right? Like, It sounds like, why are you focused on the fact of like, so that was purposely done. I think that were to show you the first red flags that this mother is not, maybe there's something more to this mother and than there is. And that was the first indications without beating us on the head on it. It's a subtle, very subtle thing to just like, but the kid is so happy, and his perspective is like his father can do no wrong, that he can't pick that up, obviously, because he's not thinking about those little subtleties. one of the things that I thought was interesting was going back where we talked about the mother talking about how she was forced into that life. She was a slave. And if you remember after the movie when we talked to Keith about it, and Keith mentioned, and this is another interesting perspective where, yeah, but he gave her a better life. Like, and that's an interesting perspective because, yeah, she was forced, she was a slave, right? But he did give her a better life, meaning like she could have easily been a slave where she's like toiling and doing all this stuff because there are slaves. That's a normal thing in that world. But he actually raised her position. So there's an argument too. So the question is morality wise, is the mother evil for wanting to kill her husband who had elevated her from a slave to a queen? Or was she right because regardless of whatever her status, you can't force yourself? See, that's the question. Like, are we imposing our modern morality to a morality during a time period where you should be grateful? You would have been like a slave toiling away. I gave you status, similar to now where you have trophy wives. But in most cases, trophy wives, they want that position. In this case, she didn't want that. She sounded like she wouldn't mind being a slave versus being forced to be a queen.
Yeah, to me, more so than the status that was elevated, it was like the fact of you taking away the choice. Like, okay, say his mom wanted to be with the uncle and wanted her sons and stuff like that. And he was like, forget that. You're my mom. You meant to be with me and I'm saving you regardless. Like, technically he'd be wrong, but in his head, he would be right. Right. So it's kind of like, I think it's just the fact of something being put on somebody and they have no choice of it. And so, that's true. But how much of that is our modern morality where we think that choice is like important versus back then where maybe choice is like you have to choose your family regardless. That's your only choice. There's no other choice. Yeah. So for sure, I know that's how they did it then. So, but I'm saying as far as I don't think that she would associate forgiving what was done to her just because she's the queen. I'll say it like that. I think that, even though she might be quote unquote better off, it's interesting that she didn't say I was grateful for your father for, taking me and making me queen. It was still about he raped me, he made me have you, and he did this to me. So it wasn't like all she wasn't talking about the good stuff. She was talking about all the stuff in her justification for wanting him to be gone.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate on that, the idea of the rape. Yes, it's more than likely, in our modern perspective, he raped her. We'll take it for what she said at face value and being true. But I will say, if you are elevated to a queen, what do you expect? You're gonna have to give him an heir. It's not gonna be like, what do you expect? You're gonna be like a king and queen and you're never gonna have kids? You're never gonna be intimate with them? That's part of the package. And and you could argue that I'm taking from Keith's perspective, but I don't know if he was necessarily talking. He sounded like he was more talking from the perspective of like a modern moralistic standpoint. I'm going to try to talk from the perspective of during that time period where you have a certain station in life and you accept that station.
Right.
She got elevated, but she actually, I think in my opinion, broke the law of whatever the station by the fact that once she became queen, you got to accept that you're going to give him an heir. That's just like, there's no question. Like, that's the reason why you have a queen. Otherwise, why have a queen? You could just be a king, right? You don't have to. You can just have a bunch of concubines. You don't have to have a queen, but you have a queen because you have to have an heir to further. Because once you go away, then your kingdom is gone. You don't have an heir to like you maintain the family legacy.
And then also, if she would have had a daughter, she may have still been a concubine.
That's true too. But I mean, the goal is I mean, that's not something in the control. If it's a daughter, a bunch of daughter, but the goal is it's the hope that you have sons. So just throwing kind of like a devil's advocate, where if you wanted to view the mother as evil in that world, you could argue that the fact that she, despite the fact that, you know, she was forced to do it, but that's supposed to be your job as a queen. You're supposed to give the king heirs. Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know the way they had it back then, if they had it where, you know, you didn't necessarily get your queen from slavery. It could have been like another kingdom could have had, you know, a daughter and their daughter get with your son. I don't know what all the options were, but regardless, like you're saying, if that was the rule of the land and that's just how it went, then it wasn't, no crimes done.
Yeah, I mean, in that time period, I agree with you. I don't know myself. If you think back like to British royalty, usually it's going to be like either brother incest, or it's going to be like another royal person that you're paired up with, because bloodlines. It's about bloodline. Now back then with the Vikings, I don't know if they were really concerned about bloodlines, or if they viewed like royalty to be like a certain upper higher class than the slaves, so they want to maintain the integrity. Maybe not. Maybe that's why taking a slave wouldn't have been any different than like being paired off with another, you know, tribe's king, queen, daughter or whatever, because it's like they might not have viewed like, even though you're a slave, well, I'm not better than you as a person because I'm royal blood. We're the same, but I just happen to have more money than you, and so I'm just going to take you as my wife, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, it's like a lot of conflict for different reasons, and you kind of understand a lot of, you know, various sides of the situation, because it's very interesting to have. It's almost like watching dated cartoons or dated movies, and it's like the language or the, you know, or even the exposure of body parts or whatever, or even jokes and things like that. You know, you almost got to consider the time. And I think the reason why we have a lot of issues now with stuff like that is because we don't consider, even though we know we should consider the time in which it came from, we don't. We treat it like it's today. So words of the past, it's the same as today, and that's not true. It's out of context. And so definitely this movie you have to watch with, you know, with context of the time. Otherwise, everything everybody would do and say would be offensive and wrong and whatever. It could be many issues. It'd be more stuff to be upset about than it would be to be in agreement with. How about that? You know, especially if you're talking about slave movies, or you're talking about, you know, something like this with the Vikings and how stuff, you know, no, it's all technically wrong. The whole thing has been flipped, you know, and we go through that today with different things and different stuff, but same kind of stuff, that society is shifting in a certain kind of way. And it's like that boat you're trying to pull in the, you know, and you're just trying to hit that corner, but it's just that water is choppy, you know, making turns ain't easy. And so it's kind of like, should you be even turning, or should you be leaning into this friction? So it's just this moral fight of what we consider to be correct today. And who's to say it's even correct today? Because somebody tomorrow might see me and look back and be like, what were you guys thinking? That's some nonsense. Yeah. But you had to be in that nonsense at that time, because everything got to line up and be like, this is okay today. We'll look back on it and we probably wouldn't agree with the choices that were made.
But in this movie, I love this movie in that when you talk about the morality, I think a big thing about morality and the big influence on what our morality is, I definitely think religion plays a big part of our morality. For example, like in this movie, perfect, because the Christians are viewed as like the evil. And if you look at it from the perspective of like, if you worship Odin and the Norse gods, all the stuff they do, the killings and everything and the revenge, that's all within the sacred context of the believing in Odin, the Norse gods, and that belief structure. And then you come into the whole Christian where Jesus Christ, you know, like turn the other cheek. Now remember, like even in the Christian, before Christians, the Jewish, before Jesus, it was like no different from Norse thing, where it's like, you got to kill your enemy. There's no turning. The
Old Testament.
Might makes right?
Eye for an eye.
So if the Jesus coming into the picture, whatever you believe or not believe with Jesus, change the dynamic in the Iron Age of like where it was okay to like storm the castle and kill your enemy and just take their women. It was totally on a moral standpoint that was correct.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Yeah, because if we look at our like where we are now modern wise in terms of morality, we're basically Judeo-Christian, like Puritan. It shaped our morality. I mean, like, who's to say, like, if in an alternate universe, if there was never a Jesus, we'd be watching the Northman, and it wouldn't even be. It could be a comedy because it would have been the norm, even like up to now.
Exactly. And really, not only the words and the characters that are found in like religion and things like that, or mythology. Just as important as what's being written, it's the current society's interpretation of those things.
Yes. Yeah.
Superman could have been the savior of our world from another planet. And so it's a fine line. It's just like, what do we decide is okay? What do we decide is right? What do we decide is true? Because a lot of stuff is built on no evidence. It's built on how we used to do, or built on how we read it today, or how it felt. A lot of stuff, And that's why a lot of stuff is so interchangeable, or the stories are so similar, but just different characters, It just depends on who's telling the story. It's just a lot of common characters with different names, but same journeys and familiar situations.
It's possible too that if we took religion out of it from a practical standpoint, as the civilizations got more advanced, that we could have also evolved too for the sake of preservation, where we realize we can't keep doing things this way, where we just kill and constantly like fight all the time, where we got to find a way to compromise. We got to find a way to make laws where we don't necessarily just, get revenge on somebody, or we'd never survive. If we constantly kept doing that, we as a society, for the sake of self-preservation, let's find a way to like make peace with the opposing thing and like come to concessions. Like maybe that's a possibility too. Like as time went on, civilization, if even taking religion out of it, we might have been able to figure it out from a moral standpoint and still gotten to where we are now. For the sake of us preserving ourselves, we realize we can't keep doing things this way.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of enough people getting behind one particular idea is what decides in a way. The people kind of accepting whatever that reality is at the time. But truth is, whatever it would be, for things to kind of be the way they are today, it's because the environment and society had to change. It had to make things less scarce, So before you had to, take land, but now you don't have to fight for that. You have to fight for the job to get the land, but you don't have to kill and fight for that land. You don't have to fight and kill for fruit and vegetables because they already have a system of having that grown and done for you. So you don't have to fight for food. You have to fight for the money to go buy the food that was already taken care of. So you have to destroy and take the land. You don't need land as much because you only need to care about your space where your body is, because you don't need to have a fields to till for harvest every year because somebody else is doing that. So they take away things so we won't have reasons to fight and cut up. But you notice when things happen like the pandemic or scarcity, then everybody goes back to stealing, killing, and robbing. We go back to the basics again. When those things that are put here to keep us calm and to give us less reasons to have to go take or hurt somebody else, then we're fine. But anytime there's scarcity for jobs, money, food, women, whatever it is, men, then people, start pulling out, start turning into Vikings and trying to fight for these things, even though we had other things to kind of take us out that nature. So our nature comes back when it's needed, when it comes to scarcity and things like that. So society kind of dictates, the behavior of the people. And so I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, and also interesting you brought that up where I think also another factor that plays into it is that in the cases where now in a modern time where we are not having to kill our neighbor to be able to get food, it's more just like at an upper level now where we're just trying to get a better job, but now that we're at this position where things are more readily available to us, it's almost like that whole when people start becoming more privileged and they don't have to worry about the basic necessities, and so they want to find something else, that's when they start trying to make more rules, because they're just kind of sitting, they're twiddling their thumbs. They don't know, like, you're not so busy in your day just trying to survive. You can survive now easily, but it's just like the level, like how much better do you want your life? Do you want to be like live a better life? You could live now much longer than back then, even as a poor person. But once you get to the upper level, it's almost like I don't want to say you're bored, but like because you're not struggling day to day, you're trying to find other things. So you start making all these rules, or you start trying to find, for example, the whole woke thing where, like where people like kind of derisive because they view it as like the people that are woke are just like people who have nothing to do because they're living they're not really living like true difficult lives. They're just kind of privileged, but they're just trying to find something to be upset about.
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. I think that's true. I think if you have idle time, then you could worry about philosophy and things like that. You could dream, things like that. That's why it's hard to be creative in times of scarcity, or you're trying to survive. When you have either you're surviving, and if you're not in that mode of survival, then you're creative. You could be, because otherwise, if you're open and trying to be inspired and create, that's when the enemy attacks. So if you're in a thing of survival, it's hard to be creative because you're fighting against two different things. One is trying to keep you tight, close, and secure. The other one's open up, bringing in. And to do both at the same time is contradictory. And so if you have leisure to dream and think about, not only do you think about stuff that may or may not affect things, but also a lot of times people who they spend that time, idle time, to figure out other ways to secure what they have.
Yeah. I just think part of it too is like, I think that the way we as humans are structured, that if we're not like trying to just survive, so we're just really working just to survive day to day, I think something in us is built for, we can't sit still. Like we have to find, whether or not we're intentionally trying to find conflict, we're not totally like, if I hate to go in the Matrix, but in the Matrix, when they mentioned about that, when they tried to make the perfect paradise, they said it couldn't work because
they rejected it.
Because people can't like fathom where everything is perfect. There's like always something within us where there has to be a conflict. We're like manufacturing these when everything is perfect, and we have like, that's what I guess that's my point, where when you're not living day to day and you reach a higher level, or you have the luxury to be able to live a better life without having to kill people or worry day to day if you're going to live, then we're so unsettled that we have to find new conflicts that aren't necessarily there. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So,
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Something else I thought was kind of interesting, and it kind of came up when we were talking about, Amleth's destiny, that was given to him by the shaman when he was with his dad. And he sees the thing about how he's going to, protect the legacy and things like that. And something I didn't expect from this movie, considering how it was grounded a lot, right, is that how it was so intertwined with mysticism and all this other kind of stuff. And so it was just kind of like, I didn't know if the visions and stuff and that whole thing with the magic and all this, was that like real, or was there an interpretation of what that was, or were we seeing what they thought they were seeing? Because the thing with the perspective, like we moved on the kid's perspective on what he knew, and so we believed it as if it was like a vision of what was supposed to happen or how it's supposed to be. But when that got disrupted from his encounter with his mom and that reality check, it shook all that stuff. So after that, did you still consider the dreams and the prophecies? So like when the prophecies came up, did you still give weight to those things? Or do you even think those were supposed to be real, or were they just there in their minds and it was just for them and we're just seeing it since we're connected to them, we're just seeing what they're seeing? Or do you think those things was like magic and mysticism and all that kind of stuff? Do you think that was really real in this world that was created in this movie?
I'm gonna throw an interesting take, or what I think is interesting on that. I guess first my question is to you. If we take the prophecies and all the mysticism to be true, meaning that there really is like a realm where like the spirits or like the gods are talking to you, giving you messages about, okay, so let's say that it is true. Does that mean that it being true, like he's prophesied to kill his uncle for the sake of revenge on his father? If it's true, on a moral standpoint, does that mean that the prophecies that are true is moralistically correct? Meaning, is he obligated to do that? Right? Mm-hmm. That's my question to you. Let's take it that it is true. What do you think? Do you think that he's obligated, that he must do this because he's getting these messages?
Okay. Well, I'll take it like I would if I put myself in a situation. I'm obligated to the truth that I believe for myself. So if I believe that's to be the truth and that's what's guiding me, then I would have to take it to be like it's my destiny and that's how it's supposed to be, and so I think that's an individual thing, because who's to say that somebody else isn't getting a different vision? Or are we just letting the visions go that we like? So we'll accept all the good ones and all the bad ones. That's not true. It's a abstract on that part. But when they say it's something definitely that's gonna benefit me, then we'll take it as pure. But if it's like, hey, you got to be a better person, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to get up when you don't want to, and then it's like, that could be an interpretation.
But it's always interesting because when I think of destiny, I think that when they say destiny, I think that it'll happen. Like if I'm sitting on my couch and then I get a vision that says you're destined to, win the lotto, right? Mm-hmm. If I never buy a lotto ticket, how am I going to be destined to win the lotto? Or will mysteriously I'll get a lotto ticket because my sister will buy a lotto ticket, and then she'll say, you know what, as a gift, I'm giving you a lotto ticket. And then, because that's what I think of destiny. I think that when they say destiny, it's going to happen regardless of whatever your actions are. That's what I think of when they say you're destined to.
But that's always tricky because you don't know if you're fulfilling it because you were told it. That's the rub. You don't know. Because you could say it's destiny after you get to a certain point because you have here now to say like, well, it was meant to be. I'm sitting right here now, I'm talking to you on Zoom right now. Was it destined? Or it's because we decided that's the day we were going to sit down and talk, and that's when we did to back up what we planned. Yeah,
so, well, that's why I'm saying the thing about if I sat on my couch and I got a vision and Jesus Christ told me you're going to win the lotto, right? Yeah. If I never move from that couch, or if I never go to get a lotto ticket, but I get a lotto ticket because my sister gave, that's what I'm saying. Like, isn't that destiny? Because I didn't choose to, but it still happened to me.
But okay, so what's the opposite of it? What if you didn't get it? Does that mean that you were really truly destined not to have it?
Well, then I would think that I was hallucinating, or because we always assume that when we get these visions from like spirits,
but we never know until we get confirmation, though.
What if it's true? Well, let's for the sake of argument, let's say that it's true that he really is visited. But what if they're just messing with him? What if these gods what if they just wanted entertainment? Hey, we want to see this guy. He's this big ass tough guy. Let's see him kick ass, and his dad was killed. For entertainment purposes, let's mess with these like lower beings and just like give them these things and for entertainment purposes, cosmic entertainment. Let's watch them, see what they try to do because we're giving these, because we take it at face value that when we see these visions and if we accept the visions as true, that the ones who are giving us the visions are somehow being like truthful to us or not deceiving us. But what if they were trying to deceive us? What if they're just trying to mess with our head? Like, meaning what I'm saying is it's possible that it could be true, but that we shouldn't necessarily, Hamlet, with the scene where the ghost, where he's wondering, like, is this my father or is this some like evil spirit that's just trying to make me do something that I shouldn't be doing for the sake of entertaining that evil spirit?
Yeah, like I said, we don't know. We don't know if some of it's like wish fulfillment. We don't know. Because really, a lot of times when people say something's destined to happen, a lot of times it seems like people say that after it happened.
Yeah.
It's not like they called it out and then it happened. That happens sometimes too, but then that could be wish fulfillment. Or it could be like, you brought it to yourself because you brought it up, or you focused on it so then you see it all of a sudden. So it could play into all those kind of things. We accept and deal in the ways that so we could survive, so we won't go crazy. And so if you're a person that needs to think that everything's destined and you feel like your destiny is going to be a good one, that might be to keep you moving to try to get to a better spot. Even if you don't get to that destiny of being a millionaire, it's enough to make you, or what you need to hear to make you feel good enough to get up to keep trying.
Yeah.
Say, I want to end it all, I'm tired and I'm done. If you tell like my destiny is forever to be unhappy or whatever, that leans into what you want as well. And,
But in those cases, I'm talking about if an external force, like it's one thing to choose, but if an external force, whether or not, if we believe that this external is actually giving us a message about our destiny, that's where things are interesting. Because like I said, I didn't answer your question, but to answer your question, yes, I believe that all the mystic and all the prophecies were true. I believe that in the movie that it was true. But what I also believe was that he could have still chosen not to take that path, because I think that while he was really getting messages from the other outer world, spiritual world, that I didn't trust that the ones giving the message. I thought that they were trying to mess somehow, like, because for the sake of like a spectacle, wanting to see, like, let's see this play out. Let's give them this prophecy so we could see him dance like a puppet and we can get entertained by seeing this.
Are you talking about the shaman who told him that as a kid is getting entertainment out of it? Who are you talking about who's getting entertainment? I'm talking
about the actual, because I'm not sure if the shaman is like the Norse religion, believed in Norse, but I'm talking about anything that's connected to where the shaman. There's also, he had the dream where like the Valkyrie was like, I really believe that he was getting messages from whatever mystic world was giving him the messages, either to the shaman but I also think that they were doing that because for their entertainment. It's a weird take, but I really believe that, like...
Well, when you see stuff like with the Norse mythology, you do see where you have, like, the gods are on the clouds, and they're kind of like, hey, do this, because that's how, like, even in the movies back in the day, they would kind of show how humans were like chess pieces, like, I'm putting that against you. What do you have, Ares? And Ares is like, well, okay, you have them on a ship coming, so what I'm going to do is put the Kraken in the water, and that's going to take care of that. So it's almost too high up to confirm or verify. So I don't know. Put it like this. I think that what he was seeing was probably true only because he was getting the same information from different people who didn't communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So his woman was saying the same thing that the shaman told him when he was a kid. And then his dreams. So his dreams could have been brought up because of what he heard as a kid, and it's just kind of continuing on the thing that was put in his head, as a thing, like, I'm going to be somebody, this is this and this is that. Because, it was powerful enough for him to be in a situation where he could have rolled off into the sunset, and he chose to go back because he felt so strongly that if he didn't, then that would mess up the vision that was given to him by someone else. But like I said, it was confirmed by somebody else that had no relation to the original person. So to me, that was kind of a confirmation that the information was true. As far as the intentions of it and who was actually giving that information, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the solidifying things that, for me, that solidified the fact that visions were true was when he saw on the tree his children, his future children.
Right.
I thought that was like an indicator, and I thought that was the one point in the story where it was giving him a final choice where you don't necessarily have to do this, finish what you need to do. You can actually turn away and actually just have a life with, Anya's character and have children. Right. But he still was adamant, and because the vision he had earlier in the movie trumped that final vision with his kids. Yeah. So he had to, for him, that was the priority vision he had to follow.
Yeah. So it was a trip. When his whole world got flipped upside down, he realized his mom wasn't going to be on his side about the whole thing. He knew he had to, speed up his plan and get out of there because he wasn't really sure what this was going to mean when it came to putting his woman in danger and all the rest of that. And it's going to up his timeline because he was trying to do everything under stealth, but he just kind of told the enemy, in a way, his plan. And so he had to move differently and quicker. And he ended up leaving with his woman, right? And that's when, he had a vision of his future, and he felt like if he didn't take care of his uncle, that it would be a thing that's going to follow him. And also the vision of him fighting his uncle like in fire or something, or having this battle in fire. Yeah. It sounded crazy. It didn't make any sense. But, as we watch in the movie, we're seeing this, different stages of this volcano that look like it's going to erupt sometime soon. So I thought that was kind of interesting how that all kind of tied together, his destiny and all that. And then the whole thing where, first the child died, as a casualty of the situation. And then the ceremonial burial thing that was going on. And then, his mom eventually being killed as well. Yeah, this movie, it just tripped me out because it just constantly kept changing, in a way, If I wasn't a movie person, I'd probably be thrown off by it. But as a person, just appreciate seeing stuff that's good but different than what I'm expected. I kind of marvel at the ability to be able to do that. How can you just trick and not break your neck? It's always kind of neat. So, but it's just constantly like, okay, it's grounded, but then it has mysticism, and then it's kind of like everything is not perfect as perspectives change, but then he has destiny that's tied in there too. So is it like it's just, everything was just kind of contradictory in a way. Yeah. And so it was kind of milling this way through all this stuff. Nothing in that movie was at face value, really, except for maybe the visions. And that's the thing that you should question, because that's normally the thing you can't trust. Yeah. You can't trust the vision. You trust real life, and the vision is kind of like if it lines up then good, if it don't then But that was the only thing that was almost the through line, and everything else that was quote unquote grounded in reality was constantly changing and getting flipped.
But in talking about the visions, I just realized this. What if the visions were basically just a message of this is actually what's going to happen? Meaning it's not, I don't know if that's the right term, but basically it's just like, this is how it's going to happen. Like it's already been determined because we've already seen the future. There's that argument like, are you really like making a choice, or are you just a pawn of, like it already happened? What I'm saying is all the stuff that we're going to see, he's not choosing it. It's just a message saying this actually is how it's going to happen. It happened already. We're in the future. We've already passed that point. The spirits or mystics, we're just telling you that this is how it's going to happen. It already happened. We saw it already. We're in the future.
Right. Like I said, to me, the visions was the only through line that stayed pretty consistent. Like I said, that was the only thing that was confirmed. Everything else was not confirmed. What he thought happened to his village and his dad didn't match up. What he thought of his mom and dad's relationship didn't match up. What he thought of his uncle didn't match up. What he thought what his life was going to be didn't match up. The way he's going to do his revenge didn't match up. You know, he thought he was going to end up sacrificing himself and taking out everybody to revenge his mom and dad. That didn't match up. His mom was alive. It didn't match up. He found a woman. That didn't match up. He didn't know that he's supposed to find a woman and the woman was going to bear his children. That didn't match up. So everything that was in real life did not match up. He just kind of fumbled his way through with a through line that he held on to kind of get him through. But the only thing that stayed true throughout the movie was his destiny that was given to him by the shaman. Even to the fact that even the vision of him, fighting to the end, basically in a fire, basically like in hell, which didn't make sense. It sounded abstract. So I was surprised when they showed him, and I was like, oh, he's in the volcano fighting, because it sounded outlandish until I saw it. I'm like, that was the truth. Okay. How could that be possible? How could it be fighting in, hell? How could it be fighting in fire? That doesn't make sense. It sounds fanciful.
Yeah, it was a truth, but it was just told in a different way. But it's true. It was true. It was true, but it just was described in a way where when we think of hell, we're thinking of otherworldly. Yes. But it's just a description. It's not necessarily mean he's in hell. Yeah. It's just describing that it's hell-like.
It was our interpretation of what was being said.
But they didn't say hell-like. There's no word like light, so they say hell. So we take that as a literal, he must be in some otherworldly thing. No, it's just simulated to what we imagine hell to be, which is fire and all lava or whatever.
Right, which was messing with our perspective. Yeah. They used our own thoughts and history and perspective against us. But the whole movie kind of did that.
It's just more dramatic because you're going to be fighting in a volcano. I don't know if they had like word for volcano, or if they just say like, you're fighting in the mountain that has this fire or whatever.
Well, usually when it comes to stuff like that, it's never really concrete. It's always kind of vague. You're going to be in a hot place. So that could be Cancun, and that could be, your car's on fire and you're stuck in there.
Like fortune teller type, just very vague.
That's what I'm saying. It's vague, but yeah.
Enough to you can't necessarily dispute it, because if you believe in that, then you'll find, that's right. So they said that. So you'll try to they make it vague enough where you can find commonality to make it's for you if you want to believe it.
So sometimes, because there's levels to that. Some of that stuff you seem like, it applies to everybody. Some of the times, they may say something that might be right on point. Now, they might not have the exact wording, because it seems like a lot of times that stuff kind of goes by feelings, and it feels like this, it feels like that. And so it could be true and it could come up, but it wouldn't be, like I said, that exact thing, but still closer than should be guessed.
Yes. I really like this movie because it just throws like the conventions of what I'm sure all the audiences that saw it or are going to see it believe it's going to be. Like, it doesn't make things like black and white. It like makes things gray. So, but then again, from depending on the audience and their perspective, I could have gone it and just totally not accepted the gray and just said, you know what, the prophecies are true. Mm-hmm. This is a revenge tale, but that's a choice I make. Yes. Whereas most movies, they don't necessarily give you that choice. They make it like clear that, okay, in another director or another version of Northman, they could have just made it where it's just like clear cut, like he's in the right, mother's in the wrong, or killing his father because the father was the noblest person. Right. But this movie, it mixes you up because we assume, well, I don't want to say we, but when you mix mysticism, and let's say if we accept the mysticism as true and we don't put our modern values and say, well, maybe he was just imagining things, but we just accept it as true. Right. In most cases, we always think that the mysticism that we're seeing in the movies is like telling us a truth. Mm-hmm. But in this case, yes, it's telling him what may be his truth, but it's not telling the whole truth that, hey, your father was an a-hole, right? So yes, you're destined to like get revenge on your uncle, but that doesn't mean that what you're doing is right. But we assume that when we hear like this thing with prophecy and destiny and mysticism, that the message is giving us adds a moral right to whatever action is going to be taken through that destiny.
We're not the ones in charge of the directions, then it's almost kind of like it's a means to an end. Yeah. Sometimes it'd be like your destination, say I'm trying to go whatever, and then Siri tells you where to go, right? It doesn't tell you how fast to drive.
Yeah.
It gives you directions, but it doesn't tell you how fast to drive. It don't say if you're gonna be a jerk cutting people off or making stops every 5 minutes. It don't tell you all that stuff. So the stuff in between, you know, is kind of irrelevant. It just tells you from here to here. You'll get there, but your journey within getting there is gonna be different because we'll have the same directions, but I might drive fast, you might drive slow.
How you do it, how you get to that destination.
It's kind of up to interpretation of the person who's following the map.
Okay. Well, what if this is a wrench in the story? What if the mother and uncle also had visions in terms of, you know, you gotta kill your husband, and you know your destiny is to do. Now, how would the story be viewed when you see both perspectives of, like, in terms of morality? I'm just speaking from the terms of like them doing, because the Northman is doing what he's doing in terms of trying to fulfill this like destiny, because he thinks there's a moral right of doing that, meaning like that's the reason why he's doing it.
All that stuff is personal to the person. I'll say it like this. Usually in movies, you don't hear that side. You hear one or the other. You're going with the protagonist, so you don't hear the other side. And sometimes if they have it where somebody is doing that kind of thing and two people that are opposed to each other both have the same vision, usually one's happy and the other one's upset. Because I got the same vision you got, that you're going to be the one. And so it steps me up and give me, you know, a pep and a push to try to get rid of you. So hopefully that doesn't come true. So normally, like I said, if it's a vision and they show other people having it that's opposed, one is getting the battery in their back to go forward and get that win, and it's pushing the other person in the back to like, I know you're coming and I'm going to meet you off at the pass because I also see that you're going to be the one, but I'm going to do everything I can to stop you. Yeah. Don't just say like, I'm going to give up and be like, oh, I'm not going to do it because they're the one, so I'm just going to sit back. No, they're trying to fight it. They're trying to fight it with all they can because they see it and believe it as well, and it's not in their favor. So the only time I really see when both sides are having different visions and it doesn't really come up as being an issue, that's why it's like when it's a war, it's like, you know, the pagan people are like, oh, we got this behind our back, and then the Christian people are like, hey, we got God behind our back. You never hear both sides, because what if both sides believe in God? They both think they're gonna. Only time I ever see that really, it's like in a football game. Yeah, they got the Rams. God got the Rams back, and God also have the Niners back. And so we'll see who God. Then they become different gods, and it's like we'll see which God is gonna win at the football game, because the victor will tell you who the true God is. That's the only time you usually see the same entity that's powering somebody and it's opposing. It's kind of like the answer would be at the finish line, and then they'll be like, well, my God must be real because I had victory, and your God must not be real because you lost.
But I think part of it too, where they tend not to do that, like from a movie making standpoint, they don't want to confuse. Audiences just want, like, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy. You know, and you can have obviously situations where the bad guy is charismatic, or is you can empathize with the bad guy, and they're a great bad guy because of that. But I think the idea is you still want where it's a clear cut, like, I'm gonna take the good guy's side, like, meaning they don't want to and that's why this movie's so great, because Eggers throws a wrench in all those things where you start to doubt. It gives the audience a chance to be able to start to doubt, whereas in other movies, they don't give you that option. The information they give you, they try to lead you in, like, for example, in the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, they like, it's black and white. He's the good guy. The emperor, the son that killed his father is the bad guy. They don't tell you, they give you little hints, but they don't give you enough where you'll ever empathize with the evil son, the one who killed his father to become emperor. They want to just lead you on that one path. But this movie, Northman, it doesn't. It gives you the information, and it's letting you decide what you want to do with that information.
Yeah, he wrote it well enough where it has layers. Like I said, it's interesting, but it kind of plays into perspective. But I think this movie did a beautiful job. But we could finish off with the fact that he knew he had to get out of there. He was leaving with his woman. He has a vision of his woman being pregnant with 2 children. Even though they had got away and made the choice to go back and take care of his uncle. He finished off the rest of his uncle's family. and they have the fight that was prophesized, in hell, in the volcano, to take care of business and to finish it. And for him, he was seeing it to secure his legacy, and his uncle saw it as to revenge for his wife and his children and to just end him. It's almost like even though Amleth was there to get revenge, his uncle almost turned into that person where he was going for revenge for his family and to get rid of this annoying nephew of his. And we were talking about, how similar to like Hamlet and stuff like that, and then also Lion King. When I saw that and I thought about Simba and Scar fighting, and, with the fire and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, yeah, they got that, even the fire scene with the fire in the background, that's even very similar.
I was going to bring up, I'm glad you brought up Lion King, but that's a great comparison analogy, because in the Lion Kingdom or Lion World, when the head male is like usurped, what usually happens? They kill the cubs, right? And as soon in the Lion World, as soon as the cubs are killed, then all the females
are under him,
and they don't rebel because there's no cubs to tie them or make their loyalties go against the new ruler. Now they're open, and then the new leader will make all the lionesses, and they don't fight back because the cubs are all gone, so their loyalties to the former leader are gone. Perfect example of like the Northmen killing the children, so they don't rise up against the new rulers.
Yeah. So I thought this was a wonderful movie. Like I said, I think it's one that needs to be seen a few times, just all the little details and stuff. But like I said, I think for me in the beginning, and then for most people, I think when they first see this, it's just the whole conflict of trying to, because that trailer is so powerful, but to get that trailer out of your head, because like I said, you just think it's going to be this action bloodbath thing and, simple revenge and all this other kind of stuff, and it just takes this turn, which was refreshing in a way, because we have all those other movies. We have 300, we have Conan, we got all those kind of movies and stuff already. And so it had a problem of, like, for identity purposes of looking like one thing when it truly was something else. I went through the same thing with this movie called The Green Knight. It was the same thing where you thought that was going to be this, action adventure kind of thing about this kid that's going to be this knight, and he's going to find his way into earning his spot and his place. And he did, but it just wasn't in the way that I thought was going to happen.
Have you seen that movie? Is it The Last Duel?
It's on my list.
Okay. When you get a chance, watch that movie. It's a perfect movie about perspective. Like the whole thing that we're talking about, like the Northman on perspective and like how it affects what we view as who the protagonist, who's a good guy, who's the bad guy, and who's in the right, who's in the wrong. When you get a chance, watch that movie because it literally deals with perspective. Curious what your take on that is.
All right. So you have any final thoughts or words about this movie?
Yeah, I definitely, The Northman is a great movie. I would definitely recommend it. I will say that it's not what the trailer portrays it to be, where it's just like a gladiator or like Die Hard type movie where it's just one guy against a whole kingdom. It's not that, but it's still a good movie, and because it mixes all these things like mysticism, spirituality, and it also adds things like the idea of destiny, and also throws in things with like morality, where who's in the right, who's in the wrong, depending on perspective. I definitely would recommend this movie, and hope that it picks up steam also when the DVD and Blu-ray comes out. Yeah,
I think this movie tried to accomplish a lot. I really enjoyed it. To me, I think something like this would have fared well as like a 4-part series or mini-series or something like on HBO Max or something like that, just to give it its full breath. But considering the time that it had to do what it did, I think it did a good job. Like I said, just the fact that it's the original in a way. Old story flipped in a new way, I think that's a feat, especially in this day and age when we've just seen everything done so many different ways, so many different times. So I thought it was a nice twist on a familiar story. Definitely would recommend it and think people should check it out for sure. It was a fun watch, and it was great talking to you about it.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely enjoyed watching and also talking about this movie. It's one of those movies where, for me, I could literally talk about it all day. There's just so many things to unwrap with this movie. And you could focus on like even just one part of this, one topic in this movie, and you could just keep talking about it because it's surprisingly so deep for a movie that comes off as superficial, that it's not deep, but it's actually very deep. It allows you to be able to be deep with this movie.
Yeah, for sure. So that was my conversation with Joselito about the movie The Northman. Until next time, peace.
Peace.
Hey, it's Jay. If you enjoyed my conversation with Joselito, check out our conversations where we talked about the movie The Northman, Everything Everywhere All at Once, as well as the latest Dune movie. Thanks for listening. Until next time, peace.